Commissioner. We will start our questioning now. We will start with Ms. Dancho, please. Go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today. In the audio recording, you mentioned specifically a request that you got from the Minister's office. Can you confirm that you did, in fact, get a request from the Minister's office?
There was a request, yes.
From the Chief of Staff, Zita Astrovez, she made that request of you?
I believe so, yes.
And the request specifically was to share the weapons information at the April 28th press conference, correct?
Incorrect. The information was not to share the information, just simply a question if, in fact, the information of that press conference would include information about the weapons.
Okay, but she did, so she asked you whether it would be, is what you're saying?
If it would be, yes.
Okay, we've asked the minister several times in the hour before you if that was the case, and he flat out denied that that was real. He denied that his chief of staff would have done that. He denied that his office asked or even knew that you were going to be seeking this information being released. How do you respond to him denying what you said here today, what you said over the summer to us, and what you also said at your testimony at MCC? He's saying that's, in essence, he's saying it's not true.
Well, first and foremost, I didn't deal a lot directly with the minister. I did in the beginning of the event, but more so I was dealing with various people in his staff as well as the Deputy Minister of Public Safety. There was a lot of back and forth. This was, like I said, it was crazy times. There was a lot of phone calls, a lot of different talks. I didn't have my staff with me for the most part because of COVID.
I understand, but the minister, sorry to interrupt, Commissioner, but the minister is saying that this did not happen, that his staff did not ask you to do this.
They didn't ask me to do anything. They just asked a simple question.
Right.
I provided one of the versions because there were several versions of the media event that day, and I provided one of the versions of the speaking notes of Superintendent Darren Campbell.
Yeah.
And in that, they asked if, in fact, the information about the weapons would be part of that.
Thank you very much.
Release.
You mentioned, though, like even your words now, like it was sort of a simple ask, is this going to be included? You kind of, to me, you seem that you're downplaying this a bit. But when you listen to the audio recording of that meeting, it's very clear that this was very important to you. In fact, you said that you would have to apologize to the minister for not, in essence, delivering on that. So I'm getting a bit of a tension here where you're saying it wasn't that big of a deal. She had this ask. I said, yes, it would be. But then it was a big deal to you, wasn't it? That's why you called that meeting. That entire audio recording was about this issue.
No, it wasn't about this issue. It was 90% of that meeting was about the issues regarding the flow of information from the start of this incident. There were several requests for several different kinds of information that I wasn't receiving in a timely manner. Some of the information wasn't completely accurate. As mentioned in the recording, I do say that I plan to have this meeting at an earlier time. There was 2 or 3 times or 1 or 2 times that I would have wanted to have the meeting, but I was very conscious.
Thank you. Commissioner, you mentioned you had to apologize to the minister. Did you speak to him and make that apology?
No, I think it was more to his office, and it was about an apology of misinformation. It was just simply about the fact that
Pardon me, just to clarify, you apologized to his chief of staff?
Yeah, I'm going to say somebody in his office. It was more than likely his chief of staff that I would have said, you know what, sorry, didn't get that.
Understood. So Zita Astrovez, the chief of staff, asks you whether you're going to share this information. From our perspective, that would be political pressure. The minister's office, which is the minister, his chief of staff, we know that if it's the minister's chief of staff, it's the minister asking for it. So if the minister's chief of staff is asking whether this information that you connected yourself to the OIC gun control policy coming forward, if that was going to be included in the press conference, to us, that's political pressure from the minister's office. That's the concern here, ma'am.
I appreciate your perception, but your perception is incorrect.
So, but you understand the perception that you were attempting to further the Liberal political agenda concerning gun control, but you mentioned it specifically in the audio recording, ma'am. That's irrefutable.
Absolutely
you mentioned
not.
it in, are you denying that you mentioned it in the audio recording?
No, I talked about the gun legislation because if you recall, my very first media event was with Minister Blair. And 1/3 of that was about Nova Scotia. The other 2/3 was actually about gun legislation. Obviously, that was in the news quite a bit. So I was providing context for my staff. You'll also recall that there has been many requests. We had a rule when we provided information to the minister's office that nothing could be released until it was released by our folks.
Thank you very much.
That's why it was important what was released and what wouldn't be released at what time.
Again, you're kind of downplaying the urgency you had with wanting the weapons information released at that press conference, but yet Sharon Tessier, who is the RCMP commissioner or communications lady, she emailed her counterpart in Nova Scotia, quite insistent. She said, please tell me Darren is going to mention the guns. My phone is lighting up. She's saying this to her during the press conference, clearly indicating there's serious urgency from her, who she answers to you, correct? That why isn't this information being released? So if you're looking at this all together, Commissioner, it is very difficult for us to sort of believe the narrative that this wasn't that big a deal, that you weren't trying to further the Liberal political agenda, because in the audio recording, you make it evident, you make the connection. Your staff are really harassing the Nova Scotia staff, saying, why isn't this information being released? You understand the perception. That's why you're here today. And I may say the minister denied any of this. He denied that his chief of staff asked this of you. Don't you find that odd that he's saying what you said in committee here and in testimony was incorrect?
No, there was a lot of information going back and forth. And what I will say is that, it's important to note that there was a lot of requests of when are we going to release the names of the victims? When are we going to release the locations of each and every location of the deceased? There was lots of information because they could not speak about it until we did. So it wasn't unusual to ask if, in fact, information was going to be included. And the firearms was only one of several requests. So we're making it all about the firearms, but really it wasn't all about the firearms. And my meeting that was just one example of many others. There was a chronology I was looking for. There was a map I was looking for. There was some timelines that I was looking for. These were all expectations that I had that had not been met. And the firearms was but one of those.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll have to cut you off there. Thank you, Ms. Dancho. We go now to Ms. Demoff, please. 6 minutes.